and welcome to Series 3 of my podcast, Innervation, where we get to hear stories and experiences of incredible women from diverse backgrounds and perspectives in science and technology. Our conversation gives us insights into some fascinating innovations, but we also get to relate. Here on Innervation, I give women a platform to be heard and seen, because this exact conversation is also in video format on YouTube. And honestly, every single episode is inspiring and uplifting in all sorts of different ways, because we hear about what these women have learned along their life's journeys, both personally and professionally. This week, I talked to Claire Rose, a civil engineer.
My name is Claire Rose, and I'm a chartered civil engineer and chartered project professional with a long background of working in civil engineering and major construction projects. And I'm currently a strategy manager within a large engineering procurement and construction company.
Wow. Claire, I have to say that's, it sounds like you do a lot of things and in an industry that is managing a lot of big projects. What kind of work do you do on a day-to-day basis? Like, what kind of projects are you involved in?
So I'm really lucky. I get the opportunity to work with some of the teams that are delivering fantastic projects all around the world, from motorways through to helping support energy transition projects, which I think all of us know right now is incredibly important. So as part of my role, I spend a lot of time kind of understanding our capability and looking forward ahead to kind of see what are we going to do in the future, and working with the business to help deliver that.
So you've been in engineering for about 10 years. That's an incredibly long time to be doing something that I'm assuming is very male dominated.
Yes. So, I mean, it's interesting because I'm probably pushing into now, I guess, September. It's probably well over 15 years since I actually started my undergraduate degree. And I think that's the beginning, or maybe actually, if you step back even further, a lot of women kind of start to drop out when you're doing the STEM subjects at school as well. So probably for nearly like pushing on 17 years, I've actually probably ended up, as you said, spending more time in male-dominated industry. And I think that's interesting that we constantly have more and more women kind of dropping out as you go into more of those STEM subjects. However, I do think we're kind of starting to turn that tide. And I think over the last couple of years, we've started to see more women going into maths and also physics and the other sciences as well, which are key enablers to be able to start and go to university to be in STEM careers if you decide to go to university. But even opening up apprenticeships as well is starting to expand the amount of women that are now in our industry.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually noticed a change, and it's very positive. I feel like women are just finding their voice and are gaining confidence in the industry. 10 years, the 10 years that you've been in the industry, you must have seen a lot of change. I guess getting a bit personal, like, did you ever feel that sort of, what would you call it, like underrepresentation when you first started out?
Yes. So, and I think it also depends on in what type of organisation you end up starting in. So I was quite fortunate early at the start of my career working for an engineering contractor. So I think that side of things means that you're more exposed to probably more of a masculine environment when you're working in construction versus engineering. And actually, as part of my development, I ended up working across engineering, contracts, project management, and also construction as I was developing in my career. And I think through that you do see different facets, different kind of proportions of women and men, and actually taking away just gender, like diversity as a whole, it starts to change in those environments. But why, I think the question is, why is that? And I think there's lots of different barriers that mean that, and it's actually an enabler now, if you think in the flip side. So some of the areas are more easily accessible for people to be able to have more flexible hours, working from home. Since the pandemic has really transformed, I think, a lot of our kind of STEM industries. So I think the barriers are starting to kind of come down, which is fantastic, but there's still a lot more to do. But when I think more specifically, so if we think construction, typically the hours are longer. I think that can be a barrier for a lot of people going into it, and it might also be exciting. People might want to be in that environment, being outside a little bit more when you think about civil engineering construction. But I think it all depends on how do we match the people and their passions together, and finding those right times and environments to actually be able to bring those opportunities that people can actually then not just feel that they have to work in one environment or the other, but then understand what options are available for them to actually be able to work in a field that they really enjoy, that aligns with kind of their wider kind of work-life balance.
When we talk about sort of construction and infrastructure, I mean, let's really get sort of grassroots here. Like, what kind of projects does that involve?
So civil engineering and construction really encompasses like a huge amount of different things. And I think the best description I've ever had of kind of civil engineering is and description of it, it's shaping the built environment around us, and actually I think that really helps to surmise it really well. So it's building some of the railways, it's building some of the ports that get our goods to and from, to help support our society really be what it is. Thinking about some of the houses, the water treatment. I think engineers actually make such a huge difference to society, especially when you think about just from what you do on a day-to-day basis, you know, putting the kettle on, whether it's the electricity for the power stations that have been built. Although I have to say civil engineering doesn't really put all of the different elements that go into that power station. But a lot of civil engineering is in and around everything that we do, and throughout the course of our lives, whether we're trying to travel with the aviation sector or the railway sector or even the roads that are around us. So it's a huge variety of different things. And I think that's why sometimes it can be too big for people to think about, well, how do I fit in within that? But for me, I've always kind of enjoyed working on big major projects, and part of that I think is bringing the people together. So how do you bring lots of different people and be the sum of greater than that part? And we need so much more different types of engineers, but not just engineers. You know, we really need to make sure we've got the right governance in some of our projects, and we need to really have a broad range of different skill sets to allow us to build some of these projects. Accountants, project controls to make sure that we deliver our programs on time, on budget. All of these different skill sets, that they're not actually conventional engineering. A lot of them have come from accountancy, or they've come from lots of different backgrounds, but they have an awareness of really infrastructure projects. So I think that's probably my big thing, is actually you don't automatically need an engineering degree to work in infrastructure. And I think I think in the future we need to kind of think about how can we make more infrastructure projects have greater accessibility, so we can have so much more cross-pollination, lots more ideas, so we can deliver our projects faster, cheaper, and more replicable.
So as a little girl, what inspired you to go into something like this? Because it's quite an unusual choice, isn't it, for girls?
It is, and actually I remember being at university, and most of the women that were part of my year group either had an engineer or a dad or some close family member that was an engineer. There wasn't really anybody that didn't have that. So I'm really lucky, actually, so I chose civil engineering, and my mum actually is a civil engineer. So again,
Wow.
quite a rarity to have like two women in the family being engineers, but I was lucky enough to have that. And her background was actually in water treatment, which is a very different side to kind of the big heavy civils that I've been more involved with.
What's big heavy civils?
So big heavy civils I would categorize as being spanning across lots of different industries, but it's the big bridges, it's the big foundations, it's the big structures, and across my career I've worked in delivering some fantastic railway projects, but they've always had kind of big heavy civils components with lots of concrete, lots of rebar, and really transforming that built environment around us and helping society. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've continued in this field, is I really see the value of what all my efforts go towards. And I think little things like one of my early projects that I worked on was an elevated railway viaduct. But it was, you think, oh, that's great, get to build a massive bridge, and that's a lovely reminder of what you've been part of creating. But it's more than that, actually. And I think for me, it's the idea that that bridge, which is as a viaduct, effectively spanned across lots of multiple lines, whereas before it was kind of like a motorway junction where everything was at grade and there was effectively like a roundabout and everyone has to come and stop. Whereas actually what I was part of creating was having that grade separation like you have at a more developed motorway junction, where you have a slip road that comes off and then you can go pass underneath it or above it without causing any disruption to the main kind of flow of the line. So for the railway, I was doing that. But what does that actually mean to people and the people that are using that infrastructure? And for me, the reward was knowing that so many people are going to go home to see their families more reliably each day. And I think for me, that was kind of I'm proud to be a part of this project, because I'm proud to help make that difference to probably thousands of people's lives day in, day out, rather than having, 10-15 minutes where they're like, oh, I'm late because the trains are delayed again. Having that quick ability to know reliably that they're going to get home on time. And if you think about all of us working in this industry as part of infrastructure, we all have that opportunity to make society better.
It's so amazing hearing you talk about it like that, because when I think about engineering, I just think of massive, heavy structures. This is in civil engineering. I think of, just the machinery and the mechanics of making it happen. And I tend not to think about the why. And listening to you describe the why is just yet more evidence of why it's so important to have diverse team engineering, because I think it's perfectly okay to be thinking about the mechanics and the physics and the heavy structures and all of that, but I think it's also important to have, as part of that thinking, the kind of motivation behind it, and what enthuses you, and with diverse teams, everyone is motivated and enthused for different reasons, because they've come from different backgrounds, different perspectives, and all of that. And hearing you talk about it, I don't know, it just I wouldn't say feminizes civil engineering, but it does add this kind of warmer touch to something that was actually quite cold as a concept.
No, I think that's a really good point that you've made, because I think that's probably one of the barriers around why more women are not going into other sectors of other disciplines of engineering, actually, because civil engineering is probably really fortunate to have so many women, because they probably can tangibly see, when they're doing their A levels, or to be honest, most people make their decisions much earlier to be able to funnel down and focus at A levels. So probably when they're like 14, 15, 16, when they're thinking about careers, it's easy to see really, or it's a little bit easier to see what civil engineering is all about, but it's so much harder to even comprehend, what does a mechanical engineer do? What does a process engineer do? Because our industry isn't very well or very good at publicising some of these things. So I think that's a really good point. And I think women are also more appeal to the altruistic side of what we do. When, if you probably ask lots of different women around why do they go into certain different types of careers, it's probably around, I want to make a difference. And I think we were having this conversation right before we started this call around, why we actually went into engineering. So how do we actually appeal and even sell our industry differently so that we can make sure that we've got a pipeline of diverse and talented people to work in engineering and infrastructure?
Yeah, and I think another myth that needs to be busted is, for any girls that are thinking, well, I really find infrastructure projects interesting. I'm fascinated by bridges and the roads. And, for anyone that has that awareness that it could be of interest to them, I think there's this added worry for women in existing in an industry where the people they work with may not understand what it's like being a woman. We have various different roles in life that we could take as mothers and partners and, members of family and there are many hats we can wear. And engineering doesn't often strike people as being an industry that's open to individuals that wear different hats, if you know what I mean. So how have you managed to balance all those different roles?
I think that's a great question, actually. I think the industry is getting more and more open to that. I think I've seen it over my career, just different expectations on what it means to be an individual, isn't it? What does it mean to be an individual and to be able to work in an environment that will welcome you and adapt to that. So, I take myself, I'm coming back after maternity leave, and actually I've had loads of support. Lots of colleagues have been really open and welcoming and, an understanding, I think, recognising that you go through lots of different life changes and things will change also as we get towards the end of our lives as well. We may be looking after or caring responsibilities may start to come up for ageing parents as well, or sick relatives. So there's lots of different needs that people have, but I think mental health awareness is becoming a much more greater factor in the engineering construction industry. A lot of that actually stems from the challenges that men have. Men actually are more higher in be more susceptible or have a higher proportion of suicide. And I think engineering actually, or not engineering, I think construction specifically, there's a much higher risk for men and have historically taken their lives, which is incredibly sad. And part of it, I think, is the male side of things. But what that's opened up is having a much more open conversation, rather than feeling that you can only bring a little bit of yourself to work, is to come to work and be your whole self. And I think that not only supports women, but it also supports the LGBT plus community as well, so that you can be more open and transparent about some of the challenges that you might have. And I think it's important as leaders in the industry for us to be more open and transparent about some of the challenges that we might have. So I know I've been quite open about discussing some of my needs coming back to work. And when I've been on calls with other women, or I'll be telling them about some of the challenges that I face as I'm coming back to work in that transition, such as I might be explaining to them, oh, actually, I have to take breaks now because I have to go, because I'm breastfeeding at the moment, I have to go and express milk. I mean, those are different types of things that, unless we have leadership visibly kind of explaining and role modeling it, it's going to be difficult for the next generation coming up to feel comfortable about discussing some of these challenges that they may have, whether it be health problems, whether it even just be boundaries for their personal life that they feel they need to share. And that could be, actually, I need to go to the gym every morning. I can't go to that early meeting that you want to set at maybe 6 o'clock because that works for you in your time zones. And having those healthy boundaries, I think, are really important. And having that respect enough with your colleagues to be able to openly discuss those is very key. But I think touching on one of your points around kind of why women are really important in our industry, and why I know personally both my organisation and lots of other organisations in our industry are keen to attract, retain, and develop women in our organisations, is that we need diverse people. And we can't exclude 50% of the population. And if we think about the infrastructure we're creating, it's going to serve 50%. It's going to serve 50% of society, which is women. So if you broaden it out and think also an aging population and lots of other factors, we need true diversity in our work organisations to be able to even think about some of the challenges that, as we're building infrastructure, as we're designing infrastructure, how can we include those people in our thinking? And I've got a good example, and it's not actually from a work side of things, but it was from my local area. So I live in London, in Lambeth, and one of the key things that they've developed is a community group focusing on women, because they've you'll be aware of probably the Sarah Everard situation that happened. I think it must have been about 2 years ago, actually. It was 2020, and before that, actually, in advance of that situation, a fantastic group within Lambeth actually developed a survey, and they identified that there were a number of high-risk areas, and a lot of those high-risk areas were actually near construction sites. And when I talk about them being high risk to women, it was environments where women felt really unsafe, and whether that was because they were being leered at or catcalled or followed home. Some people have felt uncomfortable. But the way that we design that infrastructure, the way that we create the hoarding along those kind of avenues, which often around construction sites, really tall, high, because we're trying to shield the site, make sure people don't get in, but actually we create a really difficult and uncomfortable environment for people to use that area, and sometimes encroach on pavements, which means women and men that may have buggies with children or disabilities may find it difficult to kind of pass through those areas. Now, there's lots of different controls that are in place, but there was one example of a construction site in London where they had an elevated kind of bridge over the construction site, and the side kind of parapets were actually in plastic. But then that means women that were walking above, if they were wearing skirts or anything, then the men below could potentially see up their skirts. So I think there's a number of different thought processes that if we have more women involved, and not just women, but more diverse group of people, we'd start to think about actually the people that are using this infrastructure. Have we considered their needs, and have we considered the impact that this will have on them? So I think it's a really great. It's a really great thing to make sure that we can attract more women, and that's why I think it's important that we even think about how can we, not to say that engineering and lots of technical qualifications are important, but how can we try and reduce the onus on having certain very specific qualifications in our job descriptions when we're looking for people, so that we can try and even expand the pool of people that we're looking for, so we can attract some of those people that are coming from more diverse backgrounds to be part of our teams to develop these solutions for people.
Yeah, I mean, you really highlight organizational change that needs to happen and actually has been happening, which is really encouraging, because I love this idea that women are now much more comfortable to say what they need. They are being treated more fairly. than ever before in terms of maternity leave and juggling all those different aspects of a typical female life. Whether that is becoming a parent or needing to do some exercise, or, I think it's really great. I've definitely seen a change as a result of the pandemic, where more flexible working hours is much more acceptable these days. And so I think things are heading in the right direction from an organizational point of view. But looking at kind of you personally, how have you sort of remained strong within your own skin to be in a job and be in an engineering role for as long as you have, assuming that, you're working amongst a team that isn't necessarily like you? What are the top tips that you can share for how you've sort of powered your way through?
No, that's a great question. And I think for me, probably the top tips that I've got is come from a place of understanding. So I think all too often we can ask questions, and I think the way that we ask questions can really frustrate people. I think early on in my career, I think I asked like the really obvious questions, but I think and sometimes you might feel that, oh God, I feel like I'm asking these really stupid questions. And why I say that is actually asking questions can be quite vulnerable, but on the flip side, it can also help people want to come and help, give you that help and answer that question for you. But it builds trust. So I think finding ways to, even if it feels like you're asking a bit of a stupid question, to like build the bridge between some of you and your colleagues can be an incredibly powerful tool. Because I think some of the colleagues that you will work with, and particularly, I've worked with a lot of men in my career, I can't say I haven't, they may be defensive, working with you, or they've got an approach, or they've got a different way of working. But if you ask a question, there's nothing wrong with that. I think another thought that I've got around working in different teams is find what brings you together. So I'm a great advocate around team building and just even organising lunches together or dinners together, or just going to pub for a drink, if that's something that the whole team actually do. But having those diverse events, actually building teams, when you start to know people or know individuals as people, and their family life, their background, their history, those little things mean that you're creating a team of people. That team of people is very difficult to then be adversarial or have difficulties around, because you know that person. Why would you do that? I think the challenge we have often in civil engineering and construction is often we're crisscrossed by lots of adversarial contracts. Now that's something that's changing, but maybe some of the experiences that women are having in our industry, and it's not, and I can't say that it is easy. I have to be frank. I've had lots of different scenarios and experiences in my career which have been incredibly difficult. And when I reflect on some of those experiences, I think one of the things as women we often do is like say, what could I have done better in that situation? And probably taking a lot of the feeling, and maybe actually taking a lot of that blame yourself. And what I would encourage a lot of women that are working in the industry is actually think, no, rather than thinking, what could have I done differently? How could I have checked, what could I have done differently to change that scenario around me? But it's not automatically you and the factors that you have kind of brought to the table that may have created an argument, a situation, a disagreement. Sometimes it might have been the environment around you. There's lots of different factors, and I'd really strongly encourage women to not think automatically, what have I done wrong? Because I think that's something when I reflect on during my career, because inevitably it's going to happen, whether you're a man, a woman, or you come from a diverse background. It's inevitable that you're going to come up against some form of kind of adversarial kind of incident or problem. So having those kind of touch points where you can actually step back and think, actually, I can reassess what I can do differently, but what could I have done to try and at least manage the environment around me as opposed to changing myself? I think is something that we could do differently.
Wow. I wish I had received that kind of advice when I was in the thick of the industry, which is a long time ago now. But it's kind of amazing hearing you say that, because as someone that was heavily underrepresented in the industry, every time there was an awkward, uncomfortable situation at work, I immediately thought it was my fault, because there was no one like me. I don't understand. I mean, I was a brand new graduate as well. So it's like, maybe I don't have enough experience to really get what's going on. Maybe I need to learn more. Maybe it's because I'm brown. Maybe it's because I'm female, all those kinds of things. And it's really, really powerful, you giving that kind of advice, because kind of listening to you, I don't know, I feel like you're being backed up by your mum, because she's gone through it, and you would have had that role model to look to. And I really feel like what you've said provides girls and women with that role model voice and perspective, to say, it's probably not your fault. And more than that, it's not just about assigning blame, as you say, but it's also saying, don't worry about the problem, put all your energy into looking at how you can resolve the discomfort. And that's really striking a chord with me today, because I feel that the older I've got, and this is not, exclusive to STEM, I think it's just a life thing, but the older I've got, I've felt that I'm able to just go, rather than being this sort of the victim almost, to look at a situation that's uncomfortable or difficult or challenging, and just say, what is there to learn in this situation? Because rather than saying, oh no, I haven't done that wrong, or, everyone doesn't understand me or whatever, I have actually been recently taking a big old pause, and just allowing myself to really understand all the different team players. Because the younger me would have said, that person doesn't get what I'm trying to say, or, that person doesn't think I'm good enough for this. And it was just all very complicated. And actually today I'm able to take a much more mature approach and just say, okay, clearly there isn't a meeting of minds here, and it's not all my fault. And let's find an opportunity to make minds meet. So I love this suggestion of trying to find ways to bring people together. I really see the importance of that. And as a woman, suggesting ideas of bringing people together is very empowered, because the younger sort of graduate me would never have thought to do that. But, if you have the confidence, if you can find the confidence within yourself to make that happen, I think it really, really empowers you. So thank you.
And I think it's one of those difficult things, because I think the earlier you are in your career, you kind of feel under a lot more pressure to perform, to be perfect, Unfortunately, as women, we're more likely to be constantly having that kind of perfectionism as well. So that when you don't get the outcome that you were desiring, you always think, oh, what did I do wrong? But actually, it could be partially you. It could be your communication style. It could be how you're communicating with somebody else. There's lots of different ways that people respond. And maybe you're not communicating in the way that they prefer. So then they kind of switch off a little bit. So there's lots of different factors. And it's sometimes working out what generally you could do differently. So I'm a great advocate in just taking yourself out of the situation. And I think I do actually recall one of my mentors or managers like saying to me earlier on in my career, saying, don't think about you being wrong, think about what do you need to do to get the project forward, or what do you need to do to get your passion or your voice across. Like, what's the purpose of what you're trying to do? Take yourself out of the equation. It's not about you, it's about what you're trying to deliver. And I think having that focus on something else rather than thinking it's all about me doing all of the work to perform, then I think it takes a huge amount of stress off the situation, and then it avoids you being in that situation where you actually feel that you're failing, and you get into an awful cycle of kind of that fear of failure, which again I think is another thing that women often face, because we're expected to be perfect a lot of the time. So I have to say, not perfect at all in any way, shape of the word. So I'd encourage others to not try and be perfect, because it's never going to be healthy for you, and it just puts too much pressure on everyone else as well. We're all imperfect. We just need to kind of balance kind of our needs around us.
Oh, that's such good stuff. Zooming out again then, and kind of final question. As a woman in engineering, as you in engineering, what would you need, if anything, to really be working in a perfect industry for you? Put another way, like, how does the engineering industry need to change to really be, a perfect place to work?
No, that's a great question. So I think for me, and I guess I've got the new facet of having been a new mum recently as well, is I think around flexibility is going to become more and more important. And actually it's more than just, okay, it's for new mums, but it's for helping to create that work-life balance. And when I talk about flexibility, I mean it a bit more broadly than just being able to tweak your work hours. I think it needs to be a bit more thinking about days, evenings, how can we kind of appeal and access more people to join us in delivering some of these projects, because I do think that if we can find a way collectively to be open to different ways of resourcing, I think that's going to unlock a huge amount of potential, and it will make it much more appealing to not only the next generation coming up who want to have more of a portfolio kind of like career and job life, rather than being kind of stuck with I'm just going to do this job for now, but actually have the option that they could do lots of different things. And I think that's something that we're seeing with millennials coming up. But also I think we're going to need to find a way of extending those which are closer to or have just retired as well. We just don't have enough engineers in our industry at the moment. So I think how we can find different ways of appealing to more people. And there's some really good examples in the industry. I've seen some of the High Speed 2 consortiums have been looking at part-time working, even in construction. For a lot of different roles, and some of the construction companies in the UK are also looking at how they can do 4-day working weeks as well, which is part of a broader UK initiative around efficiency. And I think some of those items are game changers in the way that we can appeal to so many more people by being open to different ways of working. And I think we've got tools that we're using today like Zoom and Teams, but I think they're going to change in the future. And I think as an industry, if we can be more embracing of technology so that we don't have to all be in the same office at the same time, it's going to open up opportunities for everybody and make environments far more inclusive and making teams much better, more effective, and better able to deliver some of the challenges that we've got in our industry.
Well, Claire, I have to say you really make engineering look appealing. I know a bit about the engineering industry, but talking to you, I just feel like it's a place where women can feel comfortable and sort of embraced and welcomed in and developed, which hasn't always been my opinion of engineering. And when I started this episode with you, I thought that we were going to be talking about an industry that is very sort of is marching on with women kind of struggling to fulfill all their different roles in life whilst being engineers. But I don't get that impression listening to you. I feel like it is a place where women can thrive, and it's just really inspiring to hear your experiences and how you're making the industry work for you and how you're able to really fulfill your purpose in improving people's lives through engineering. So thank you so much.
It's okay, no problem. Thank you very much for today. It's been great to meet you today.
Thanks for listening, and please do subscribe to this podcast and maybe even rate and review it if you can. The more ratings and reviews, then the more interest from those trusty algorithms, which could help to increase the reach of this show. And you can watch the video recording of this conversation on YouTube on my new series called Esteemed. It's all about self-discovery, self-evolution, and inclusivity on innovation. Let's all strive to be in the best versions of ourselves and celebrate others being themselves too. As always, be kind and loving, and I wish you all a great week.